Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Is fasting safe for the food addict? Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your host today, speaking with Dr. Jason Fung. Dr. Fung is a Toronto-based nephrologist, researcher, and New York Times bestselling author whose work has helped popularize the practice of therapeutic fasting and low-carb nutrition for obesity and type 2 diabetes. He completed medical school at the University of Toronto and then went on to a nephrology fellowship at UCLA and has specialized in internal medicine and nephrology. Dr. Fung is best known for his books, The Obesity Code, The Diabetes Code, The Cancer Code, and most recently, The Hunger Code, which challenges the traditional calorie-centric model of obesity and instead emphasizes that hormones and ultra-processed foods are the drivers of overeating. In his new book, The Hunger Code, Resetting Your Body's Fat Thermostat in the Age of Ultra-Processed Food, he offers 3 golden rules for long-term weight loss. Avoid ultra-processed foods, don't eat all the time, and build supportive social habits around food. So welcome, Dr. Fung.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
What sparked your interest, first of all, in intermittent fasting and now in obesity and eating disorders?
I'm a kidney specialist. So what happens is that over the last 20 years, we've seen this explosion of type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is a reversible disease, right? And that was something that people knew but hadn't had really acknowledged because there wasn't very effective ways to get people to lose weight if you just follow the calories in, calories out model. People had done calorie counting, calorie restriction. It failed a lot, and so most doctors had given up on that. But so because type 2 diabetes was causing all this kidney disease, I really, to prevent kidney disease, you really needed to reverse type 2 diabetes, which of course for many years people said was impossible. But it wasn't, obviously. People knew that if you lost weight, you could reverse type 2 diabetes. So really the question was how to get people to lose weight. And that's really what sparked my interest, was because the weight loss has many benefits for people who are overweight or obese. So that was really the sort of root problem. If you just treat the kidney disease and give medicines and injections and dialysis, you're not actually treating the root cause, which is the sort of obesity, which led to the type 2 diabetes, which led to the kidney disease, right? So when you follow it upstream, you really have to treat the obesity instead. And that's where I started to really look at the calories in, calories out model, realize that it really just made zero sense from a physiologic standpoint. Everybody had been touting it as if it's a mathematical certainty, but in fact, it really wasn't the right way to look at things. So that's where I wrote the obesity code, and the diabetes code was about reversing type 2 diabetes and understanding what insulin resistance actually is.
You forgot about intermittent fasting because wasn't that one of your first interests?
Yeah, that came out of how to get people to lose weight. So intermittent fasting was one of the strategies introduced in the obesity code. This was written in 2016. So at the time, of course, people thought intermittent fasting was really this horrible thing you could do that was very harmful to your health and all this sort of thing. But actually, when I looked into the physiology of what happens during fasting, there was nothing really bad that happened. In fact, there were some really great aspects of it. That is, if your body simply stores calories in the form of body fat and you have too much body fat, then if you don't eat, then your body will simply release those stores of body fat. Just if you were to put food in the refrigerator and you don't go to the store, then you simply take the food out of the refrigerator. No problem, right? There's nothing bad that happens. So if you put calories, food calories, which is a form of energy, right? If you put calories into storage, into your body fat, then if you don't eat, you can take those calories out of body fat and nothing bad happens, right? And that was the whole idea behind fasting, was that this is a new, or not new, but it was a therapeutic strategy that people were not using at all. And there was no reason not to use it. It was simply hysteria. People basically, without real evidence saying that this was harmful, you're going to die if you don't eat. Why would you die if you have 30,000 calories sitting in body fat? If you don't eat for one day, you might be negative 1,800, but you have 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 calories sitting there, right? So why would it be harmful, right? So that was the idea behind intermittent fasting. Again, the hard part is actually challenging these sort of ideas that we all hold to be.
One of the reasons that people say that the GLP-1s work is that the person doesn't eat as much. Essentially, they're doing a form of fasting. They're eating much less. And there's the concern that there's weight loss, yes, but it's fat and muscle. So how can you protect fasting from muscle loss along with fat loss?
It all depends on the way you do the fat loss, right? That's the whole thing. So GLP-1s are not fat specific, right? They have a lot of different effects on you. And some of those effects are not necessarily very good, right? So the whole thing about fasting, that it's a natural thing, right? So if you think about what happens in the body, your body has a mechanism to store energy, which is calories. So if you eat, you store calories, and you store it in the form of sugar, and you store it in the form of fat. And that's the reason you don't die in your sleep every single night, because your body has the ability to store some of this energy. So when you're not eating, you can pull this energy back out, right? Just like you put food in the fridge. So if you don't go to the store, you can take it back out. So the whole thing is that if your body is going to store calories as fat, when you don't eat, why would your body burn muscle, right? Of course it's not going to. Your body is not stupid, right? Like, how would we have survived? It's if you store firewood for an upcoming winter, but as soon as it gets cold, you chop up your sofa and throw it in the fire. You wouldn't do that. That'd be stupid, right? Why would your body do that? Why would you keep your stores of body fat and then burn all your protein? So when you do it naturally with fasting, you know you're taking advantage of a system that's been honed through sort of thousands of years of evolution to work, right? So if you're a caveman, cavewoman, and there's no food, you're going to pull out your stored energy from your body fat stores. Now you get to a situation which is totally different, which is that you're going to give yourself a super physiologic dose of GLP-1 and you don't eat. You can't really compare that to natural fasting, because there's a whole lot of other things that happen during fasting that happen, like hormonally, right? We know that insulin falls, but other things go up. So growth hormone goes up, cortisol goes up, sympathetic tone goes up. So there's all these hormonal changes that happen with fasting. Does it happen with with Ozempic? Not necessarily. Are you even fasting with Ozempic? Not necessarily. You don't have to fast. You can eat whatever you want. So you could snack throughout the day if you want to with Ozempic. Yes, you may eat fewer calories, but you might be eating gummy bears all day long, right? Just because you want to, right? So there's no comparison between what happens taking a GLP-1 and what happens during fasting. Fasting is very well studied. It's a natural situation like that happens. So people have studied it. And we have hundreds of years of studies on what happens during fasting. What happens to your body, what happens to your hormones, what happens to your muscle, and so on. So muscle loss is not actually one of the big things that happens during fasting.
Okay. Difference between fasting and starvation.
It's really the matter of voluntary. So fasting is voluntary. Starvation is not voluntary. So starvation means that if you don't eat, but you have no way of eating, right? So this is what happens during wars and famines and things, right? So I want to eat, but there's no food available. That's starvation, right? Fasting is there is food available. I choose not to eat it, right? Totally different situation, right?
Let's get onto the overeating side. So if the calorie-centric model doesn't work, then your hunger code is essentially the alternative to that. So can you explain what you mean by the hunger code?
So the hunger code is a follow-up to the obesity code. So the obesity code talks about the hormonal side of what happens during weight gain and weight loss, really, and strategies to combat that. So it's not about eating more calories because, or sorry, eating fewer calories or eating too many calories is not really the idea, right? Because whenever you eat a calorie, your body has the option of either storing it or burning it, right? So if your body stores it, you're going to get fat. If your body burns it, you're not storing fat, right? But you have lots of energy. You feel great. There's lots of more energized. You feel more engaged. Your brain is working at a higher level. Your heart is pumping better. It's not the number of calories, but what your body is doing with those calories. And you don't get to choose, right? You don't get to choose, hey, I'm going to increase my metabolic rate today, right? You can't just say that, right? So people assume that, hey, if I simply eat less, I will lose weight, but you may not necessarily lose weight, right? Again, think about it. If you eat a, fewer calories, if you eat 500 fewer calories, your body could either balance the equation by taking those 500 calories out of body fat, or it could simply burn 500 fewer calories. But you don't get to choose which one your body does, right? So again, two very different situations. You eat your 500 fewer calories, but you store 500. You take those 500 calories out of storage, right? Great, you're losing fat. Second situation, you don't take any calories out of fat and you burn 500 fewer calories. So you're tired, you're hungry, you're cold, and you're not losing fat. Very different results, but you don't get to choose which one. But it's the same, comes out of the same 500 calories fewer, right? So that's the hormonal side of things. So it's the hormones, of course, that decide which one your body does, right? And it's a whole mixture of hormones. The hunger code goes into a little bit deeper about what those hormones are. And I go over 14 different hormones that affect your body weight and how to think about weight gain and weight loss. But it goes further than that because this hunger that we have is the root cause of eating, right? So if you ask yourself, why are you eating? That's because you're hungry. You eat when you're hungry and you don't eat when you're full, right? So the whole root problem of eating behavior is hunger, but it's not necessarily the physical hunger that we think about, right? And that's what the hunger code really expands on. It really gets more past the hormonal equation, which I still talk about in some detailing. It goes further than the obesity code, but it goes into three different types of hunger because if you think about why you eat, it's not simply because you're physically hungry. That's physical hunger. It is called homeostatic hunger.
There, you're talking mainly about insulin. Like I know you mentioned that there's more than 12 hormones, but it's mainly insulin.
It's not. It's a mix. Insulin is the main one that's affected by food. So insulin, cortisol, GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormone, all of those things are going to impact your hunger, right? So if you think about sleep deprivation, for example, right? Sleep deprivation, which may increase your cortisol levels because you're stressed, because you're out of sync with your hormones, with so on, that's going to increase cortisol, which then drives your hunger, which drives homeostatic hunger, which makes you eat more, which makes you gain weight, which is why people then go back and say, hey, sleep deprivation causes weight gain, which it does, right? It's been fairly well documented, right? But it's nothing to do with your diet and it has nothing to do with your insulin. Same thing with perimenopausal weight gain, for example. So again, estrogen, progesterone are changing in the body, and that's going to affect your body, like how much weight your body wants to gain or lose. And the changes that happen, especially the drop in estrogen that happen with menopause, are going to increase your hunger and your weight, right? Because then you're going to eat more and store more. So therefore, that's what happens during perimenopause. And it's very well documented again that during perimenopause, people tend to gain weight. And people say, eating the same thing, I'm exercising the same, so why did I gain 5 pounds? It's because of your hormones. Your hormones told your body to gain 5 pounds. So therefore, instead of shuttling that energy, those calories towards burning, that is feeling better, generating body heat, your body has shuttled those calories towards fat storage, right? So it all comes down to that. But if you're looking at your diet, the only one you're going to be able to affect is not testosterone, not thyroid hormone, not any of those other things. It's mainly going to be insulin. There are other satiety hormones such as GLP-1, GIP, glucagon, example, that are satiety hormones that are affected to some degree by the types of foods you eat. But and again, these are based on a lot of studies where we simply manipulate those, right? So we can create artificial GLP-1, for example, and that's Ozempic. And therefore, because we have the synthetic GLP-1, we can see what the effect of giving it is, right? And when you give Ozempic, which is the GLP-1 stimulant, people lose weight, right? Their hunger shuts down. So we know that GLP-1 has a big effect on that. The difference is that the Ozempic, for example, is a much, much higher dose than your body can naturally produce. It's
Mhm.
not a physiologic dose, it's a super physiologic dose. That is, it's a huge whacking dose of GLP-1. So that's the hormonal side of things, but that's not the only reason we eat. So that physical hunger is not the only reason we eat. We eat because it makes us feel good, right? That's pretty clear, right? That's why you celebrate. Celebrations are with meals. If you're feeling down, people will eat, right? That's the whole notion of comfort foods, right? People who get depressed might eat, right? And that's emotional hunger. So food is something that we find rewarding or pleasurable, right? And so if you are looking for that little bit of pleasure, you may go eat food, not because you are physically hungry, but you're emotionally hungry, right? So if you're bored and you want something, you can just go eat something and you'll feel better because you'll release dopamine and all this sort of stuff. And that's this sort of emotional hunger is called hedonic hunger, right? And that actually drives a huge percentage of overeating behavior because with natural foods, it's very difficult to overeat. And that's where ultra processed foods and food addictions really starts to play into this sort of emotional side of things. The ultra processed foods are engineered to maximize this rewarding behavior, right? So it's not left to choice. They have big focus groups and see what the exact proportion of salt and sugar and fat is, how to package it with bright colors, what artificial flavors to add, texturizers, emulsifiers, all this artificial stuff that they can then sort of maximize this release of pleasure. When you eat the food, it goes down very fast. It gets absorbed very quickly. So therefore, you get this big burst of dopamine in your system. So you feel good, right? And that's the sort of comfort food idea, right? So if you're depressed, you might eat a whole bag of chips, right? That's a classic. Or, oh, I'm going to eat a whole tub of ice cream because you both broke up with your girlfriend, boyfriend, right? And that's not because you're physically hungry, but because you want that sort of reward, the brain reward, the pleasure, right? And this is where ultra processed foods gets dangerous because these foods are engineered for that. If you think about food addiction and what people are addicted to, it can tip over into that, right? Just like cocaine and so on, it can releases rewarding hormones. That's why people do these hard drugs, right? But then it tips over into addiction. And ultra processed foods has that same potential because when you think about addictions, people talk about, oh, I'm addicted to salt, to sugar. I'm addicted to chocolate. I'm addicted to bread, right? All ultra processed carbohydrates, right? That release that thing, quick, quick hit of dopamine. Nobody ever says, oh, I'm addicted to broccoli, right? And I'm addicted to salmon, right? No,
Yeah.
I'm not addicted to salmon. I like salmon, but I'm not gonna eat it until I get sick. So that's the second type of hunger, which is this sort of emotional hunger. So there's the physical, which is called homeostatic. There's the emotional, which is called hedonic. And then there's a social type of hunger, which is called conditioned hunger. That is, if you pair two things together, you can quickly, so if you pair sitting in front of the TV or watching TV with eating, then one will trigger the other, right? So if you always eat in front of the TV, then as soon as you sit down in front of the TV, you're going to want to eat, right? Because the two things have become paired in your mind. And the problem is that food and eating have become paired with almost everything in modern day life, right? You go to the coffee shop, oh, you're going to have a muffin. Oh, there's a meeting. Oh, somebody's got like bagels, right? Oh, you sit in front of the TV, you eat. You go to the sporting event, you eat. You go to the movies, you eat. You go in the car, you eat. You go on a road trip, you eat, right? You get together with friends, you eat. Everything has been paired with eating, right? You sit in front of the computer, you eat. You're reading a book, you're eating or snacking, right? So everything has been paired with eating. And this is what's creating this constant food noise that's always in the back of your mind. Eat, eat. Why? Because you've conditioned it like that, right? And you go back 50 years when none of this was acceptable, right? It was not acceptable to eat in front of your computer. It was not acceptable to eat while you're walking on the street or whatever, right? It simply wasn't socially acceptable. So therefore, you didn't have this problem. Now, of course, it's everywhere you go. And then there's advertising, there's food on TV, there's food on the billboards, there's restaurants everywhere. There's in the hospital, there's like a donut store right there, right? Before you'd have a cafeteria, like it was not easy to find. So all this constant sort of food noise is also driving a lot of why people are eating and overeating. And again, convenience foods, ultra processed foods tends to be a big part of that. And so when you think about it, this whole problem of weight gain is not simply a diet problem. It's actually much more than that. It's much more deeper because you've got the physical hunger, the social hunger, and the emotional hunger. And
Yeah.
unless you tackle all three of those different aspects, the emotional and the social, you really can't succeed if you just focus on the diet because it simply
Yeah.
wasn't just a dietary problem. And it's
Okay.
just if you go out with friends and stuff, if you go out, when I go out eating with my family, I eat pretty well. When I go out eating with my high school friends, I don't eat very well. It's just the way it is, right? There's a lot of fried foods and stuff, right? So who you eat with has a huge role in
Okay.
how you eat what you eat.
Can I just go back to the homeostatic one? Do you believe in a fat thermostat?
Yeah, so the fat thermostat is essentially this homeostatic signaling, right? So certain hormones, so if you think about a thermostat, the way it works is that you set a temperature. And so think about your room, right? If you have a room temperature, gets too hot, the thermostat then turns on the air conditioning. Or if it gets too cold, the thermostat senses it, turns on the heat. Same thing with your body fat thermostat, right? And the reason you need the thermostat is to maintain a same temperature inside the room, no matter what it is like outside the room, right? And same thing in the body. So the body wants to or needs to maintain a certain level, right? No matter what happens outside, these things have to stay stable, and that's called homeostasis. So if you think about body temperature, if it gets cold, you shiver. If it gets hot, you sweat, right? Those are homeostatic mechanisms to protect this. So your body sets a certain temperature it wants to be, and then notices changes outside and then brings it back. So the body also has a sort of fat thermostat, which is that your body wants to be at a certain weight. And if you go above that weight, it will try and bring it back down. And if you go below that weight, then it brings it back up. So, for example, if you go into a room and it gets really hot, you generally don't say, wow, it's really hot in here. Why? What are the sources of heat in versus heat out, right? You'd probably say, who set the thermostat this high? Let's turn down the thermostat, right? Because if you go into a room that's really hot because the thermostat is set really high, you're sweating and all this stuff. You could try and open the door and let some cool air in, right? The problem with that is that the room thermostat will sense that cooling and then try to turn on the heat to bring it back up. So even though you've opened the door to try and cool the room, the problem is the thermostat. It's too high. It's going to fight you. So if you think about the body, if your body has a fat thermostat and it's set too high, you're overweight, you're over the weight you want to be. Now you try to lose weight by counting calories and so on. You bring your weight back down. Your body fat thermostat, if it hasn't been adjusted, it's going to sense that. And then it's going to bring it back up. And how does it bring it back up? One, it either turns on your hunger, right? So makes you want to eat. Or if you don't eat because you can control what you put in your mouth, then it will turn down your metabolic rate so that you still gain that weight, right? So people think that, oh, if I just control what I eat, I control my weight. No, not at all. It really depends on your hormones. It depends on that fat thermostat. And the fat thermostat is set by those hormones, by those 12 or 14 hormones: insulin, cortisol, GLP-1, GIP, testosterone.
Can you change the fat thermostat then using hormonal manipulation?
Oh, of course. That's the whole point, is that you can change it. There are certain hormones that push it up.
It's not just genetic.
Yeah, it's not just genetic. Now, there is a genetic component, of course, and that's the whole point. So some people are naturally very skinny, right? We've seen all these people. They're like sticks. And it's like, why are they like sticks? It's because their fat thermostat is set at that level. Now, when they eat, they just stop, like they eat, they get a bit above their weight, right? And then they stop eating, right? That's what happens because they don't want to eat. I've seen these people. I know everybody knows these people, right? I have this one friend he's skinny like a stick, right? And the thing is that he eats a little bit, then he's okay, I feel I can't eat anymore, right? And I'm like, he barely ate anything, right? It's like that's because his fat thermostat is set that way. So you can manipulate it with, say, insulin. If you give somebody insulin, somebody will gain weight. Why? It has nothing to do with willpower. It's because you're pushing that thermostat higher. So they're going to get hungry. If you don't eat to try and prevent the weight gain, and you give them insulin's telling your body, go up on fat, go store more fat, right? Insulin goes up, you still don't eat, it's going to ramp down your metabolic rate so that you still gain weight, right? Or cortisol, you ramp up the cortisol. That tells your body store more fat. And we can do this again with drugs. We can give somebody prednisone, which is a synthetic form of hormone, and that's what happens. You can do it with testosterone. So testosterone, for example, you can lower somebody's testosterone very dramatically. And the way you do that is, the reason you do that is for, say, prostate cancer. So people who have prostate cancer undergo treatments, either castration or sort of chemical castration. You take anti-androgen drugs. So you can lower somebody's testosterone very low to treat prostate cancer. And what happens is very well documented. People lose muscle and gain fat. Why are you losing muscle and gaining fat? Well, it's because testosterone is so low, right? Same thing with progesterone. If I give somebody synthetic progesterone, which is a drug called Megace or Megestrol, what happens? Their appetite goes up and they gain weight, right? So again, all these things will manipulate your hormones. If you give somebody too much thyroid hormone, they will lose weight. A sympathetic tone is another one. So you can give somebody, so the sympathetic tone, there's something called the autonomic nervous system, which is composed of the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. Sympathetic is an activation, fight or flight response. Parasympathetic, which is the opposite, is a rest and relaxation mode. So sympathetic tone, increased sympathetic tone, which is the sympathetic nervous system, adrenaline, noradrenaline, reduces body weight, right? How do you know that? You can give drugs that manipulate the sympathetic nervous system. So the old drug, there's lots of drugs that actually affect the sympathetic tone that make you lose weight. So we think Ozempic's the first drug to really make people lose weight. No, there's been many drugs that people have lost weight very successfully, actually. So there was fen-phen in the late 90s. So
Yeah.
fenfluramine is a sympathetic agonist. People lost 17% of body weight. Now, the problem was it caused a lot of other issues, heart issues. So it had to get rid of it. But people lost weight. Before that, there was amphetamines. So this was called speed. So in the 60s, again, a very popular way for people to lose weight. Medically, it was medically prescribed, actually. So speed or amphetamines, or the sort of illicit version like crack and cocaine and so on, people lose weight. So again, it doesn't affect your calories in any way. You can eat or not eat however many calories you want, but affects your set point. And nicotine, for example, is another example of a sympathetic stimulant, and people lose weight when they smoke.
Now, can we move to the hedonic piece? You talk about it in your book quite a lot, the idea of food being addictive. So you believe in the concept of food addiction.
Oh, yes. The food addiction is actually a very interesting topic because the amount of research behind it is just exploding. And what is an addiction? Addiction is somebody who takes a substance, even though they know it could harm them substantially. So smoking, alcohol, they're addictive. And it doesn't mean that everybody who smokes or drinks alcohol will become addicted to it, but some people will, and that's what makes it addictive, right? So ultra processed foods falls into that category. That is, people, when you think about smoking or alcohol, the question is, are there some people who will drink alcohol even though they know it'll kill them? Yes, alcoholics, of course, right? Do people smoke even though they know it's bad for them? Of course that happens, right? So same thing with ultra processed foods, right? Can you become addicted to ultra processed foods? Absolutely. You just have to look around. If you ever watch some of these TV shows, 1,000-pound person or whatever, as they show what they're eating, it's clear that they have no control over what they're eating. They cannot help but keep eating, right? The same way an alcoholic cannot help but keep drinking alcohol because they have an addiction. And the thing about an addiction is that there are lots of people who say that's silly because you can't not eat food. I'm like, I'm not saying to not eat food. I'm saying don't eat the food that you're addicted to, right? Just if you're addicted to alcohol, it doesn't mean you can't drink tea. Like, why can't you drink tea, right? It's like that's not what you're addicted to. Same thing with addictive foods, right? So if you're addicted to ultra processed carbohydrates, then you should avoid ultra processed carbohydrates, right? And people tell you this all the time. I'm addicted to pizza. I'm addicted to
Mhm.
chocolate. The second thing about that's important about addiction is that if you are addicted, then you have to abstain, right? So if you are an alcoholic, the only successful treatment is to abstain from that alcohol because the minute you take that alcohol again, you are going to want more and more, right? Or if you're addicted to cocaine, you can't just take a little bit of cocaine and then think, oh, yeah, I'll just stop after that because you're addicted to it, right? But this sort of logic never permeates to food addictions. People will say, hey, you can have a bit of cake, but they just told you they were addicted to the cake. So why would you tell them to eat cake, right? And then they say, oh, everything in moderation. Do you tell that to an alcoholic? Have a drink. You just won, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense, right? So because you're not treating the addiction like a real addiction, right? And here in the last 5 years, there's been a greater emphasis on trying to define it. And now by defining it, you can actually recognize that it's actually a hugely prevalent problem. So if you have an addiction, then you need to treat it like that. And then you need to abstain and say, okay, let's see how to get around it, right? So the other thing people say, which is quite stupid, is that, oh, it's a natural product. You can't be addicted to food, right? Or you have to eat food, right? So no, I'm not saying not eat food. You can eat natural foods. Second thing is that alcohol is natural, right? It came from whatever you're fermenting, right? Rice or barley or hops or whatever. Tobacco came from tobacco plants. Marijuana came from marijuana plants. Do you say that those are unaddictive because they're natural? It's
Mhm.
not the naturalness, it's the processing that happens.
Yeah.
So food is not inherently addictive because we've evolved with natural foods. But once you process it, you take all that sort of away. And yes, it can be addictive.
And do you actually talk about this in your clinics? This is quite a large amount of material that you have to pass on to clients,
We
patients.
talk about it in the fasting method all the time. So I have a program called the fasting method where we go over this, especially with we have some coaches to do it because it is a fascinating topic. And again, not something that's easily dealt with in a clinical situation. This sort of, here, I'll spend 5 minutes with you in
Yeah.
my office and be able to go into your food addiction problem. That's not something that will happen. It happens only through really talking about it and coming to the recognition that this is what's happening and that's what needs to happen. And this is where coaching can be a very important aspect, having somebody to talk to. The problem is two things. One is that it's not well recognized. Food addiction is not well recognized. So
Yeah.
if somebody thinks that they're addicted to food, like not just likes food, but is addicted to food, right? So
Yeah.
where you are taking it and you can't stop, right? Where you open the bag of chips and you can't stop until everything's done, right? The problem is if you go to a doctor, dietitian, they'll just say, "Oh,
Mhm.
moderation," right? It's like
Yeah.
you can't be addicted to food. So therefore they dismiss you immediately. Although
Mhm.
the research in the last 5 years has been exploding on this topic. So it's not something that they have recognized. And two, it's not something they can actually help you with, right? So it's just like trying to go to your doctor for alcoholism and he's you're an alcoholic addict, right? What is your doctor going to do for you in the 5 minutes that you've got,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Not a lot. You need to go to treatment programs for addiction, for example, and you realize that something like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, it's like You go to meetings, which go for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you go week after week, right? And that's what it takes to become successful at treating that addiction. It's a totally different treatment paradigm than, oh, let me go to my doctor. Because that whole doctor's visit is based on here, I have a bacteria. I have this and a fever. Let me give you antibiotics. Or, oh, I have high blood pressure. Let me give you a drug for high blood pressure. And that's a 5-10 minute visit, right? Addiction is not something you can do like that,
No,
right?
so you have a team of coaches that
Yeah, we
are
have a
work
team of
under you.
coaches at the fasting method that
Yeah.
has been attuned to it. Because honestly, if you think about the three types of hunger, which really dominate our eating behavior, right? You talk about homeostatic hunger, hedonic hunger, and conditioned hunger.
Ask about,
Physical, social, and emotional.
yeah.
We all estimate that it's 90% social and emotional, and 10% is actually the hedonic hunger, which is the diet piece of it, which is why
Well,
people argue about diet all the time because they haven't realized that, hey, the social and emotional component to it just overwhelmed the actual dietary side of it.
now let's speak to the conditional, which was the third one that you talked about. How can a person survive in today's world where the social norms are to overeat and to overeat other
Yeah,
person's
that's
food?
a great question. And the first step is really to recognize how important they are, right? So again, if you compare different countries, you know that there's a huge discrepancy in obesity rates throughout the world, right? So if you simply look
Mm.
at developed first world nations to eliminate some of the sort of other issues, right? You can compare places like the United States, which is the highest rate of obesity in the world. Not the highest, but very close to the highest. And it's a very rich, developed nation. And you compare it to, say, Japan, which is also a very rich, developed nation. But the obesity rate there is close to the like one of the lowest in the world, and
Mm.
in the United States is close to one of the highest in the world. So it's not because they're developed or first world nations. It's not because food is available and people, right? It's
Yeah.
food is easily available
Mhm.
because it's a developed nation with good infrastructure and people are rich enough that they can buy it if they want to, right? So that you take that all out because in certain places, which are very poor, of course, they don't have access to food or they can only buy the worst food available. But in both in Japan and the United States, they have very good infrastructure and all this sort of stuff. But the rates of obesity are very different. So what's the difference? If you take a Japanese person and plunk them into the United States, their rate of obesity just skyrockets. So it's clearly not genetics either, right? Because you can do that. You can do the same with Italy, for example. Italy has one of the lowest rates of obesity in the world. We take that Italian person in Italy, their rate of obesity is very low. Take the Italian person, put them into New York City, and their rate of obesity goes up much higher. So it's not genetics, it's the environment. It's the social norms that really dictate how you eat. So there's conditioning, which is this pairing of sort of two things, the food and the other thing. That's one reason why it's so important. And the other is social modeling. So social modeling is a phenomenon where the people around you define what is normal and abnormal. So if you are in a situation in Japan where it's not acceptable to eat on the streets and walking around and
Yeah.
basically eating all the time, then you're not going to eat all the time because you're aware of those social norms that prevent you from eating all the time. So therefore, if you're in a boardroom, for example, in the United States, and it's an afternoon meeting, somebody's ordered a plate of cookies and some coffee, right? Now you're bored out of your mind. So you go reach for the cookie because, again, you want this little bit of emotional sort of hunger because you're bored, you want something to stimulate you, you eat the cookie, right? Now, that's a totally different situation than in Japan, for example, or in the past, where there would be no cookie. You're still sitting in that boring meeting, but the social situation is that you're not going to go eat something. Are you really going to leave the meeting, go downstairs, go
Mhm.
find yourself a coffee shop, buy a cookie, eat the cookie, come back up, and then you walk back in as everybody stares at you and you think, where did you just go, right? And why did you have to leave just for that cookie, right? So it's not the person, right? It's the environment with them makes a
Yeah.
difference. Right? And once you recognize that, then you can say, okay, this is where I have to say, okay, I'm going to set rules for myself. And that's where fasting really helps you create those guardrails where you say, I'm not going to eat between this hour and this hour. So if you're in a meeting, you're not going to eat. If you're at night, you're not going to eat. If you're doing this, you're not going to eat because you've set those rules for yourself, right? And those rules create that sort of those guardrails that help you stay on track, right? And this is where this sort of whole eat 500 fewer calories, right? There's no guardrail. Is there who do you eat with? When do you eat? Where do you eat? Do you eat wherever you want? Do you eat whatever you want? Is snack foods okay? Yes, it is okay. It's fine to eat all this junk food as long as it's fewer calories, right? What kind of plan is that, right? You have no direction onto actually how to eat, right? Whereas something like if you have a real plan, you have to say, this is what I'm going to eat. This is who I'm going to eat with. This is when I'm going to eat. I'm going to avoid eating in front of the TV and in these other situations. I'm only going to eat at a table rather than my desk, right? That's all going to create this sort of social situation, the social modeling, the conditioning, where you're going to be able to stick to what you're trying to do. Right.
In our food addiction community, a lot of people have a history of, they wouldn't have called it fasting, they would have just called it starving themselves. I'm not going to eat because I just had a big binge. And what that inevitably happens is it leads to another binge because the conditioned response is, I'm really hungry, I have to overeat. That's what always happens. How do
Yeah.
you deal with that? I guess when people are at the extreme end of food addiction, how can you make fasting safe for them?
Yeah, because that's the wrong mindset. So I talk in the Hunger Code a lot about mindsets and stuff, but the whole idea is that
Mhm.
if you start fasting, like say you binge and then fast, the fast is there as a punishment, if you will, for you, right? That's not the whole, that's a totally wrong thing you're trying to do, right? And the other thing is that there is always the danger of when you're fasting that you're going to create a lot of this sort of hedonic hunger where you want to eat simply because you want to, right? So again, it's something that you have to, this is the hard work of talking to somebody, working it out with a coach or a friend who's going to be able to say, this is the wrong idea, right? You're applying this fasting whenever you feel like you need to, and then you're creating a lot of hedonic hunger, then you're going to binge again, right? That's the wrong idea, right? What you're trying to do is create a natural, sustainable sort of pattern. So it's okay, let's just create these rules where you're not going to eat between this and this. This is not to punish yourself or anything. It's just simply, this is the way you're going to eat to be healthy, right? So that's again the way that people have done it in the past. If you think about religions and stuff, there's many religions that have fasting. Almost virtually every major religion has fasting. It's not, oh, I binged and therefore I fast. No, it's okay, you're going to fast on Fridays, or you're going to fast in this week before Lent, or you're going to fast in this month, which is Ramadan, right? Or hey, it's Yom Kippur, or you're going to fast, right? So those are the rules. Is this, and again, they create those sort of the mindset. This is just a period of fasting because it's something to be to be grateful for. It's a cleansing, it's a spiritual awakening. It's not, oh, I'm doing this so I can binge later,
Okay.
right? It's really trying to get to the right mindset around what is fasting and how to do it properly.
We find is that when people are fasting after a binge, they probably binged on ultra processed high carbohydrate foods. So they're going to have a sugar crash. They're going to be hypoglycemic, which is a drive to eat. What I counsel people, and tell me if this is the correct approach, is that fasting is probably best done when a person is eating a higher protein, higher fat, lower carb, so that they won't have that hypoglycemic crash and so that they won't be that hungry in order to withstand the fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And so going to a low carbohydrate diet is a great way to do the fasting because remember, your body can use one of two sources of energy, glucose and fat. So if you eat a lot less glucose, which is carbs, then you're getting your body used to burning fats as fuels so
Yeah.
that when you switch to your own fats, right? So if you're eating a ketogenic diet, for example, which is a very low carbohydrate diet, you're basically using, because you're not eating glucose, you're using fats as a fuel. When you don't eat, that is when you're fasting, then you're going to use your own body fat as a fuel, right? So that's not that different from extrinsic fats, right? The animal fats
It would
and
be a good
vegetable
step
fats,
down
right?
method.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot easier. If you're eating if you binged on like a lot of high carb foods, your body's
Mm.
used to eating glucose and therefore can't switch easily to the the fats as a fuel. And therefore it's a much more difficult, right? So if you're in a situation, as you described, where you're binging on that, so you're coming down, there's no glucose available. But your body really hasn't adapted to fat as a fuel. So you're getting no energy from the glucose side of things. You're getting no energy from the fat side of things because you can't mobilize your body fat stores because you can't use it. That's where you get that huge crash. And then that's where you're going to get that horrible inclination that you need to eat. You need to eat because you haven't set it up properly,
Yeah.
right? So I agree with what you're doing 100%.
What's your opinion about the GLP-1s in the context of your understanding of the hunger code and trying to institute the practices in your practice? How do the GLP-1s fit into this? Are they
Yeah, so the
harmful? Are they
GLP-1s
helpful?
are interesting from two aspects. One is that it really points to the fact that you have to control the hunger side of things, not the calorie side of things, right? So
Mm.
there's lots of ways to physically restrict people from eating calories, right? And you can wire somebody's jaw shut or you can cut somebody's stomach, that's bariatric surgery, so that they simply cannot physically eat the calories. The problem is that when you physically restrict the calories, the hunger goes up. And therefore, they're going to find ways around your restriction. And this is what happened during bariatric surgery. And that was a huge phase during the 2010s where people thought we could cure obesity with these lap bands and all this sort of thing, right? It didn't work because you're not able to control the hunger, right? So if you simply control the calories, you eat fewer calories, but hunger goes up, you're going to lose because you're always fighting with yourself. Now, on the other hand, Ozempic's different because it doesn't control your calories in any way, right? You can eat whatever calories you want, but you don't want to. And that's a huge difference, right? So think about hunger and calories. Hunger goes down, your calories also goes down, but you notice you're not fighting with yourself anymore. So the thing about the GLP-1 system is that it's one of the satiety systems. It's part of the homeostatic system. And by giving a massive dose of GLP-1, you can overwhelm all the other hungers. You can overwhelm the hedonic hunger. You can overwhelm the conditioned hunger,
Uh,
right? It's just, you're so full. Just if you ate a huge buffet, right? And then you walk past a donut store, you're like, oh, I just can't eat it, right? You're not tempted by it. It's not willpower. It's the fact that you were so full. And that's the way that the GLP-1s work. The problem with GLP-1s, and I'm not against GLP-1s, I think they're a useful tool for a lot of people. And I prescribe it a lot actually. But the problem with the GLP-1s is one, people don't like it. So people don't stay on it, right? And that's a big problem because if
mm.
you don't stay on it, you're not getting the benefit of it, right? And it's like, why don't people stay on it? And there's good data now on how many people actually stay on the GLP-1s. And it's actually quite a small percentage of people. Less than 50% of people out of years actually stay on that drug. And these are people who are really should be on it from a medical standpoint. And the reason is that it really just overwhelms all your other hunger. So it really, the way that best describes it is that the GLP-1s make everything beige,
Mm.
right? So it's like you're not getting any pleasure from your food. But eating is one of life's greatest pleasures, right? We all know that, right? It's, oh, how do you celebrate your birthday? Have a big meal with your family. How do you celebrate holidays with a big meal, right? That's how you celebrate. Now, all of a sudden, you think about it. You don't enjoy it. Your friends are like, oh, wow, it's Christmas. Let's go have a big meal. And you're like, "Bleh," right? I can't eat that. I'm nauseated, right? And then it's, oh, our team won. Let's go celebrate. Let's have fun. And you
Mm.
go out and you can't enjoy it, right? So everything just becomes beige, right? It actually applies to other things. So people also say alcoholism, but affects alcoholism as well in a good
Yeah,
way, but it affects other pleasurable things in the same way, right?
yeah.
So people have been describing that they just don't enjoy anything anymore.
It's not
That
just beige food, but beige life.
beige life, yeah,
Wow.
because everything is just blah.
Yeah.
And that's the reason, right? So fine, you can do it to lose weight for a few months, but can you really go without pleasure for years and years on end?
Yeah. A good
You
point.
may be able to adjust that dose, right? So that you get to that point where you're able to lose weight but still enjoy yourself, right? But for a lot of people, it's just not possible. So that this is where people talk about microdosing and stuff. And I think that these are reasonable things, right? Because again, there's nothing wrong with taking a drug, right? I prescribe a lot of drugs, right? If you have to take a blood pressure pill, you take a blood pressure pill, right? It's good for you in the long term. So I'm not against these medications, but as an idea that, oh, this is all we need to do is give people enough drug. And I see this a lot. We just have to give people enough drug and we'll solve the obesity epidemic. We don't need to
Yeah.
learn about foods and eating good foods and avoiding ultra-processed foods and the right way to eat and all this stuff. It's like we just need Ozempic. It's okay, if you think that's going to help you, with no idea. Yes, you can overwhelm the systems, but can you really overwhelm the sort of social and emotional side of things? Probably not, because using Ozempic, I've been prescribing Ozempic for 5, 6 years now because it's been widely available for that amount of time. And the thing is that it has these certain health benefits, right? Losing weight has a lot of health benefits. So I do prescribe it. But I struggle to get my patients on it. It's not, see, I'm like, oh, wow, my whole practice has been transformed. Everybody's healthy now. People don't want to stay on it.
Okay.
People come off of it. And a lot of them, they just don't lose the weight because the dose that they can tolerate is too low for them to really lose a significant amount of weight. But that's the only dose they can live with.
What are your thoughts on the new American dietary guidelines?
I think there's a huge step in the right direction. I think that the old dietary guidelines were actually quite poor, and the new ones, which bring back a lot of natural foods, right? So a lot of I think there was one thing that I thought they did very well was focus on real foods. So not calories or carbs or whatever, but real foods, right? I think that's really important. So getting rid of ultra processed foods and eating foods. Again, the data on ultra processed foods in the last 5 years has exploded, and I think it's going to prove to be very important. So that's one of the things that the old food pyramid didn't talk about, right? They talked about carbs and this and that. The other thing was by flipping it upside down, what they did, I think, is acknowledge that the old food pyramid was actually quite poor. And if you look at the original food pyramid, so the stuff that I grew up in the 80s and 90s and so on, the base of that triangle was like bread and rice and lenta and potatoes and stuff. And it's probably just not great for waking. Because again, if you think about the foods that you're choosing, we were told to choose, again, we didn't want to. We were told that we should eat a lot of bread and rice and potatoes, right? That's your base of the food pyramid. Those are the foods that stimulate insulin the most. If you're stimulating insulin, you're telling your body to gain more fat, right? That's the signal you're sending it, right? And therefore, I think that flipping it upside down was this implicit acknowledgement that, hey, some of the advice we've given in the past was actually very bad, and that's
Yeah.
why it flipped upside down. That was, I think, very good signaling to people that, hey, we're willing to take responsibility for that old one not being the right advice, which almost never happens, right? If you think about official government stuff, they never say, oh, you know what, we were wrong. They mostly say, we were right, you just didn't listen, right?
So, how would you change obesity treatment guidelines if you could today?
The treatment guidelines are, it's a complex thing, right? And it runs itself mostly through public policy. The dietary guidelines is one thing, but I think ultra-processed foods, again, because they're deliberately engineered to manipulate our reward system and our social systems, you have to almost put things in place the same way that you did against big tobacco, which
Mm.
was, say, banning ads to children, for example, for tobacco. What about banning ads to children from cereals
I'd
and
love to see
sugary
that.
cereals and candy bars and all that sort of stuff, right? That's the level we're talking about, right? People think it's just, oh, we just tell people that they shouldn't eat candy bars. It's okay, but that doesn't help, right? Just because you shouldn't eat candy bars doesn't mean you're not going to eat candy bars, right? You have to make it to that sort of public policy thing. Education is one thing, right? And there's always a lot of controversy. But again, really, if you really want to make it important, like public policy, like sugar taxes and stuff are I think useful for that situation, but sugar is not the only ultra processed thing, right? So people
Right.
think that, hey, well, you just get rid of sugar and things will get a lot better. They will get a little bit better, but I don't think it captures the sort of entire problem because it is this sort of emotional and social aspect to it. So yeah, guidelines are difficult because it's you can tell people what to do, but really changing the attitudes of people. Oh, hey, we shouldn't be eating at our desk anymore, right? That didn't happen in the 70s, right? You didn't eat at your desk, right? But now people do. They do
Right.
all the time, right?
Do, do
How do
you
you make that?
do you feel that the bariatric clinicians, the obesity physicians, are promoting your message of the hunger code?
I don't really think so.
No.
I think they still focus on, for a long time, they're focused on getting people surgery, and now they're focused on getting people Ozempic,
Yeah.
right? So it's, oh, okay. Here we are always looking for the quick fix, not looking at the deeper problem of ultra processed foods. People are talking about ultra processed foods, food addiction, right? So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But we're a long way from good treatments for it. And also, hey, we should ban some of these things, right? Like, I don't think banning ultra processed foods is really the best thing. Like, it's very heavy-handed and stuff, but certainly banning advertising and stuff has been shown to work, and also education. So if you look at Japan, Japan's actually a sort of fascinating thing where they actually have nutrition baked into their school systems, right? If you look at the Canadian and US school system, we focus on giving people cookies as treats and pizza day and
Mm.
snacks on trips and stuff. Whereas in Japan, they have nutritional talks about, hey, eating natural foods. They have programs where the adults eat what the children eat, right? So they go to the cafeteria and the children are eating exactly what the adults are eating, which prevents you from giving the kids hot dogs and eating meat yourself, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things, there's been a lot of things that they've done right there, and it's not necessarily just about the diet. It's about that whole attitude of getting the people into that right mindset of this is how you should eat, how this is how you should think about eating, right? And that gets you to that social and emotional place where you can actually start to talk about these things. Same with Italians, right? Italians, they love food, right? They talk about it constantly. But then you look at the way they enjoy their food, right? Are they eating on the bus? They're packaged, whatever. No, they're getting together with their family, having a nice meal, enjoying, sitting down, having great conversation. Yes, they're having carbohydrates and stuff, but they're not eating in that same way that Americans are eating, right? It's a totally different situation. So they love their food. They talk about their next meal while they're eating that meal, right? It's obviously they love their food. Everybody loves food, but they do it in a way that's very different and better.
Our final question that we ask all of our guests is if you could tell a younger version of yourself something about, let's say, the hunger code, what would it be?
I think it would be that always focus on what what else can we do, right? So it's if it's not just about the diet, and this is the sort of conceit, you always have to challenge what your assumptions, right? Which is that, hey, if people are overweight, it's got to be about the diet, right? But it's not. It's about their social situation. It's about their emotional state, right? So it has nothing to do with the diet, right? If you're eating because you're depressed, the problem is not to stop eating. The problem is to treat that depression, right? If the problem is that you're bored and you're eating, then you need to treat the boredom, not the eating, right? So you got to always challenge those assumptions. And that's one of the things that I would say that over the last little bit, I've been much more focused on mindsets,
Yeah.
habits, trying to get people. It's not as sexy as, oh, hey, GLP-1, right? Here, I'll just give you this drug. You're going to lose weight automatically. The drug company will make a lot of money, right? It's, oh, that's not the way it works. So always challenge your assumptions and always try to think outside the box a little bit and try and figure out what else is important that might not be so obvious.
Yeah, I do want to say on behalf of the Food Junkies podcast and community of food addiction that I'm very grateful that your voice is, you have a very prominent voice with your best-selling books. obesity code, now the hunger code, that you're promoting this message that it's not just the diet, it's the lifestyle, and it's the ultra processed food industry that should be held to task. So I really thank you so much for your voice and for a loud voice that needs to be heard.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group, I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.